Today we have another live Q&A. Mark is out of office, so I'm co-hosting this live Q&A with Alicia. Alicia, how are you?
I'm well, yeah, it's exciting. Mark is in Montreal and he's presenting at a conference for immigration law. So we're wishing him well. We're hoping that he has fun out in Montreal and is able to do some networking and connecting with our colleagues from Quebec. So that's a nice opportunity. And we're going to take the questions for today and we'll see as the people start filtering in where people are listening from. So, as always, you can let us know where you're tuning in from around the world and give a little shout out and hello. And we are happy to welcome you here. And then, of course, you can always post your questions. So, we have numerous questions. People are asking a lot of things about Canadian immigration law, and we are happy to provide information. That's what we're here to try to do, is to give some solid, good quality immigration legal information. But at the same time, we're not providing legal advice because that would require us to actually know about your personal circumstances and understand what's going on for you in your case. So it's very important that we're making sure that we are trying to reach and help as many people as possible with that information. So if your question is of a very specific nature, then we'll say, you know what, you should really book a consultation. We are a law firm and we can definitely help talk to you about exactly what's going on with your life situation. But for now, we're trying to help the most people with the kind of general broad-based questions that a lot of people, or a lot of questions that people might be having over and over again. So with that said, we can do a little bit of a shout out. We've got Sora Bosson watching from Milton, Ontario. So welcome. And yeah,
We
Igor,
don't
what?
have any other comments, but I see that we have 36 people watching right now. So just give us a shout out and put a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Um, and
Mhm. Yeah, in the meantime, we can talk about the draws. We love express entry. That's kind of what we do. This is our bread and butter, and that's where we've spent a lot of our practice and a lot of our time. So yes, there was a round of invitations, but it was last week. So it was October 26th was the last round of invitations, or maybe that's even more than a week ago now. But it was a specific healthcare draw. So Igor's pulling that up and you can take a look. And our last round of invitations, the CRS score was 431, and it was a healthcare targeted draw. So those specific occupations, keep in mind when you're looking at those targeted draws, applicants always still need to meet the regular categories. So you need to meet either the CEC, Canadian Experience category for express entry, minimum eligibility criteria, and then you can have that 6 months of targeted occupation experience in one of the listed healthcare NOCs, and it's only some of them that are listed. Or you could have an FSW, federal skilled worker background, plus those 6 months in the healthcare. Some of those 6 months could be within the healthcare. So keep in mind, only if you are in those specific occupations would you be eligible for that healthcare draw. And there weren't too many. It was a decent sized draw, 3,600, but we're not sure when the next draw will be. It has been, fairly regularly. They have had, hopefully, that pause that we noticed a couple months ago won't continue. So hopefully we'll have some regular draws. They do alternate between a targeted draw. Sometimes there's a provincial nominee draw that's popped in there, and sometimes there's just a general no program specified. So we haven't had a no program specified for a little while, since mid-October. And the problem with these targeted draws is that it tends to be pushing up the general no program specified CRS score. So you'll notice that that CRS score is 500. So if you were in the no program specified as of last month, only people who had CRS points of over 500 or exactly 500 on the tie-breaking rule were getting that invitation to apply.
yeah, Alicia, and we've been working with Mark to prepare a presentation for his speech at the conference. And so among the slides that we built out, one slide compares a candidate, an ideal candidate, to the candidate who speaks, for example, French or speaks both languages. And what we realized and we talk about it all the time in our live Q&As, that you have to be superhuman to qualify for this no program specified draw, because you have to be under 29 years of age, you have to have master's degree, a like really really good level of English and French if possible, and then 3 years of foreign work experience, ideally a Canadian education, and ideally a Canadian work experience. So it's pretty tough to get above 500 points without at least Canadian education or Canadian work experience and without French. So, what would be your suggestion for those people who are looking to get an ITA and they just don't see how they can get above the 500 score?
Mm-hmm. And this is where it is definitely tricky. The first thing that I normally ask people is, have you been able to max out your language scores, right? So if you have not scored to maximize all of your points under your Canadian language benchmark levels. So you can either take, there's a few tests now, language tests that are recognized, but make sure that you're looking at the list. Usually people are doing either the CELPIP or the IELTS, but make sure that you've maximized your points. If you haven't, then keep trying to study to make sure that you can get as high of a score as you possibly can. The other thing, Igor, and we can actually talk about this as well, is French and what's going on with the immigration levels plan. And so every year, the Immigration Department has to provide a report to Parliament on what has happened with the last year's breakdown of immigration levels, and then to project forward in terms of where we're going to go policy-wise for the future years. So it's interesting to look at this, and the one thing that jumps out for me, and the reason I'm talking about it now, is the French. So that Francophone component target for the overall levels plan is increasing significantly, and it's going up year by year. So I do tell people, if you're going to be sitting there and practicing a language, it's beneficial to you for your express entry if you can learn French. And it is tough because it's not just like basic, barely scraping by French. You actually have to have some functional levels of French to be able to get some CRS points. But if you are able to work on French, then that's key. The other thing, of course, is looking at whether you're able to get arranged employment. And I do have a video, I have a blog on our website about arranged employment. A lot of people are confused about how they get those 50 arranged employment points, and it's a little bit more complex than people realize. It's not just any sort of job offer. You have to have an employer-specific work permit. If you're just on an open work permit, a postgrad work permit or something like that, or a spousal open work permit, you're not going to be eligible for those arranged employment points unless your employer can go and get an LMIA. But those 50 points make a huge difference.
Yeah, and the reason why we talk so much about French is because this week is a national Francophone Immigration Week, and the minister just spoke about the importance of French in immigration and their attempt to bring more Francophones into Canada. And in fact, Alicia, as we talk about the presentation in French, on those slides that we prepared, we made a comparison between a candidate who has 3 years of foreign work experience, 1 year in Canada, master's degree, and 28 or 29 years of age, and who speaks CLB 9 in English. Now, if you compare the same candidate with a candidate who doesn't speak any English, but has CLB 9 and CLC 9 in French, their scores differ so much. So the English-speaking candidate would have only 509 points, and the French-speaking candidate, having all the same qualifications but just speaking French, would have 534. And then if you have the same qualifications, but you don't have Canadian work experience, but you speak two languages, your score would jump all the way to 543. So
Yeah.
if you don't have any Canadian work experience, just knowing two languages at a good level give you so many more points than compared to the candidate who doesn't speak French and has worked in Canada.
Yeah. Absolutely. So that is something to keep in mind if you're struggling with the CRS and wondering what to do. And maybe, Igor, we can do another couple shout outs for people.
Yeah.
I see, we've got more people tuning in and lots of questions filtering in. So here we go. Ronaldinho, we've got good day from Kuwait. So hello to you on the other side of our our globe. We've got Abdul Rahman from Toronto. Hi, Abdul. It's nice to see you tuning in. Rami from Thunder Bay. So here we go. More people from Ontario tuning in. Here we go. Mississauga, Ontario as well. We've got Elander
Calgary.
Chanel from Calgary. This is where Igor and I both live. So hello. We've got Purple watching from Scarborough. Jared, here we go. We've got Jared tuning in from South Africa. So again, we've got a few continents covered. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
All right.
And then we can turn into questions. So we'll start with the first question that was sent by the person who posted first, and we'll go from there. So Sarab is asking, then if you filed an express entry and later you decide that your spouse or common law partner would not be coming, right? To add your spouse or common law partner, will there be problems?
Mm-hmm. And this is a question that comes up often in various incarnations. And maybe, Igor, you can pull up the A11.2 completeness check requirements that talk about adding or removing of family members. But it is something where people need to be careful because depending on how you've structured your application and when you're adding your spouse, it makes a big difference. So keep in mind that if you are filing an express entry application, you always need to properly declare whether or not you are in a marriage-like situation, whether you have a spouse. And in Canada, spousal relationships are either legal marriages or common law partnerships. So that is also considered a spouse. And I know this is different around the world, and not all countries recognize common law partnerships. But in Canada, the definition of a common law partnership would be somebody that you have resided with continuously for 12 months in a marriage like relationship. In a conjugal relationship, so you are intimately connected to that person, and that has been continuous with no breaks for at least 1 year. So here we go. If you are in that common law relationship, then it's very important that you declare it, that you tell immigration, yes, I have a spouse. Here's their name, here's their birth date and information. And immigration wants to know that so that they can run background checks, security checks, and check for inadmissibility. Because if your spouse, if somebody that you're in a common law relationship with is medically inadmissible, or if they have misrepresented to immigration in the past, or if they are inadmissible because of criminality, that will make the principal applicant inadmissible too. So be really careful about spouses. If people are trying to hide a spouse because they know their spouse has had a criminal conviction in the past, this is a very complicated, difficult area. But if you're just, you weren't sure whether you wanted to add your spouse from the beginning or not, and then you decide, hey, I think I have enough CRS points, depending on the spouse's language. So when you're the principal applicant, you're only going to get points under express entry for a few things, including for a spouse, if you do include a spouse. One would be the spouse's language. So if they do their recognized language test, then that's going to increase points, or it could decrease points because there's two different categories, right? If you're a principal applicant, there's a different ranking scheme versus if you are in a included accompanying spouse. So language is one of them, education is the other, and then the third is whether that person has Canadian work experience, and I guess also whether that spouse has a Canadian sibling. So keep in mind that if you do add a spouse, it is important that you are properly disclosing them up front, even if they're not an accompanying spouse, so immigration can do their background checks. If you then decide to include them, it's going to change your CRS score. Instead of using the CRS score calculation, maybe Igor, you can pull up the grid and you can just do the IRCC points calculation grid. But you can see on the left-hand column that there's a whole ranking for if a principal applicant is applying on their own or without an accompanying spouse. And on the right-hand side of the grid, there's the table for if a principal applicant is applying with an accompanying spouse. So here you go, take a look at the comprehensive ranking grid, and you can see that there's points per factor with a spouse or without a spouse. And so if you do add a spouse, you still need to meet all the points that you would have had if you got an ITA. If adding the spouse is going to take your CRS below your points for that ITA, you might kind of destroy your application. There's a whole bunch of incarnations of what happens if you've added your spouse after you submitted your EIAPR, but before you get your landing. And that's where people need to be careful, because If at the time that you do your landing, you don't tell immigration that you have a spouse, then they can be forever barred from being included in your application as a member of the family class.
All right. Then we'll turn to the next question from Varun, and he's asking whether he should mention a 2-month long vacation.
Mm-hmm. And so immigration in their policy guidance does say, regular vacation, usually a couple weeks per year, usually 2 weeks per year, is something that most Canadian companies would offer to employees. And so normally if you are paid as a full-time employee, you're working at least 30 hours per week, which is the minimum requirement for consideration of it being full-time work, then it's normal for people to take a couple weeks of holidays. And if they're getting paid and there's not a period where their employer stops paying them for vacation, then that should be fine. If, however, you have a 2-month gap in your work experience, let's say you took an unpaid leave, or for those 2 months you were not getting a salary, then that is something that it's important that you take out of your work experience calculation. You need to clearly say, look, for these 2 months I was not getting paid. It becomes a little bit trickier if you were getting paid for those 2 months. However, this also matters whether we're looking at in Canada work experience or outside Canada work experience, because if you're trying to claim CEC points for Canadian work experience, if those 2 months are paid but you're not in Canada, arguably you can't claim those as Canadian work experience either. So do be careful about how you're logging your periods of work, and also if it's clear that you were getting paid and some of that time you were getting paid and some of it you weren't, you'll want to have all that written in your employer's letter of reference and just break it down and show the pay stubs as well.
Okay. The next one is from Marco, and Marco is asking Alicia, you, how to demonstrate self-employed work experience. And so Marco was working for the city as a civil engineering contractor and have a job letter, monthly payments, contracts, etc.
Mhm. So, Marco, one of the first things that comes to my mind is, are you trying to claim self-employed work experience for Canadian education or CEC under Canadian high skilled work experience, or are you trying to claim your self-employment for a federal skilled worker foreign work experience? And if you're trying to claim self-employment for CEC, it's not going to work, right? So keep in mind that you cannot get Canadian work experience points as somebody who's self-employed. It has to be employment income. So not going to fly for CEC, you can't do it. But if you're trying to claim foreign work experience for self-employment, that is allowed. And it is a matter of trying to demonstrate that this is legitimate high-skilled work. So there's a few ways to tackle it. If you've been working for the city, that's something that's usually fairly legitimate, and hopefully you can show those contracts, you can show the emails or the letters back and forth from whoever was hiring you, and a description of the work. What normally is the hardest to prove on self-employment is the NOC main duties and the lead statement, the activity showing what you were doing. Because often for self-employment, you might have contracts, but they're usually just about the money. They're not necessarily about the scope of work and the actual duties that you were doing. So this is where you'll probably have to work a little bit harder to try to get letters from direct supervisors who can talk to exactly what you were doing, what were the main activities for your NOC, what were the majority of the duties that you performed on a regular basis that meet whatever that NOC is that you're claiming. You might need to get letters from clients as well. You might need to try to prove that you did certain work if you have reports that you can show, or if there was something public on the city's website or a project that has been publicized. Those are all things that you can try to work towards to prove what it was that you were actually doing.
Okay. All right, so next question was from Yuander, and he's asking whether C20 work permits can be used to apply for Alberta Opportunity Stream. And so Yuander, here's the page from the Alberta Opportunity Stream, and they provide the list of LMA exemptions for the work permits that you can use. And so, Alicia, so what would be your summarized answer to this question? So,
I'm
international
trying
trade
to read
agreement.
it. Yeah, workers transferred within a company. So those are normally workers transferred within a company is normally an intercompany transfer work permit. IEC is a separate category. Mobilité francophone is fine. R205, open work permits for vulnerable workers, post-grad work permits, open work permits. Can you keep scrolling down, Igor? Holders of open work permits under IEC's open work permit policy, temporary public policies, permits from a graduate of advanced education under Hong Kong, open work permit under Ukraine. And if you're not, it's not eligible. So it does not look like they have reciprocal employment agreements specifically listed unless IRCC's C20 policy for reciprocal agreements is actually captured by AAIP's categorization of workers transferred within a company. And that's an interesting question, and it bears probably you reaching out to Alberta Immigrant, well, it used to be Alberta Immigrant Nominee Program. Now it's the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program. So reach out to AAIP and ask them if workers transferred within a company only pertains to intercompany transfers, or if it also pertains to a reciprocal agreement where a company is transferring a worker from operations in one country to Canada. Usually they do that because they can show that they were transferring workers from their Canadian operations to the foreign country as well. So it's not specifically listed here, and it's not very clear whether workers transferred within a company is only ICT or it might include C20. So good question.
Yeah. We'll skip through the line and just answer the super chat question first. Here, Uni made a mistake on EAPR and chose yes from the LMIA issued work permit instead of no. Should he submit a web form? How does he correct it? Probably because this is a very specific situation, we would advise you to reach out for the consult so that we can take a look at what exactly happened. But overall, Alicia, once you submit an EAPR and you want to correct or clarify something, what is the best way to do it?
Yeah. And this is a challenge because there is really no way to modify your profile once you've submitted it. And the only way is really to do a web form. Um, and the reason that this could be very important or could make a difference in your points is whether you are claiming arranged employment points. And so the system should only be giving you those 50 points if you have an employer-specific work permit and also that employer is agreeing to continue to employ you on a forward basis for at least a year after you get PR. And most of the time, if you did click LMIA by accident, and that's the reason that it's giving you the 50 points, and you're now saying, oh, wait, no, it wasn't an LMIA-based work permit, and instead it was a exempt international agreement. In some cases, you could get arranged employment points if you're on an employer-specific work permit under an international agreement, but you have to have worked for that same company under that employer specific work permit with that employer listed for at least a year in the past. And they have to agree to continue to work, that you'll be working for them for a year in the future under an employer specific work permit. So this is something that could significantly affect your points. So it is something that we would want to talk to you directly about and see what happened.
Yeah. All right. Cambu is asking a question also about the web forms. Is it possible to extend the timeline, the due date, to submit an EAPR with the web form?
Because I'm a mariner, could it be possible that I get the ITA while I'm on board and the ship is somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean? So the problem with express entry is they are brutal and they do not take requests to extend timelines. So if you happen to be on a ship and you get an invitation to apply, those 60 days are those 60 days. And if you can't get your EAPR filed within those 60 days, then that ITA just disappears, right? So there is no way to successfully get immigration to extend the deadlines for you if you happen to be on a ship and you get that invitation to apply and you can't actually prepare your documents and submit your EAPR in time. You'll have to decline that invitation to apply, go back into the pool and hope for another invitation to apply. Now, what we usually try to do with our clients, and this is why Mark has the Do It Yourself course, and this is through the Canadian Immigration Institute, is that we really try to provide people with all the resources that they can use to gather ahead of time the documentation and the information and really understand the nuts and bolts of what they need to do for an express entry application well in advance of getting that ITA. And so the course actually is going to take people through very specifically, what do you need to prepare in advance? What are the letters that you need to start gathering? What are the pay slips and the proof and the proof of funds that you need to start gathering right away, so that if and when you get an invitation to apply, you will be ready. And if you happen to be on a ship, if there's a few days window where you can come back and get all your documentation filed and uploaded, maybe that's the best way that you can go, is to be as prepared as possible.
Right. All right. We have another question from RCM, and he's asking to talk about the out of status construction workers and possible pathways to permanent residence based on what Minister Miller discussed. And I think this is also a perfect moment for us to actually talk about this out of status construction workers in GTA area and the pathways that they have. So what is your take on it, Alicia?
Well, yeah, and I know, Igor, you were working with this file, so maybe you want to kind of describe what happened when you were working through the a file. Of course, no names, and it's anonymous, but it is interesting to see the existing policy, which is GTA specific, so the Greater Toronto Area. And we'll see if that actually gets expanded to elsewhere in the country.
Yeah, so first thing to mention here is that there is a special temporary public policy that allows up to 1,000 construction out of status construction workers apply for this permanent residence pathway if they have qualifying work experience and they are out of status and they live and work in GTA. So this policy expires on January 2nd, 2024. So you have a little less than 2 months right now to apply. There are some limitations, and we actually work with one of the clients right now who attempted to go through this program, but there have been challenges in the past, directly or indirectly related to that person being involved in asylum application, and so this is the bar that prevents you from applying for this program, and now we have to look for the other routes to get the person back in status. But overall, if you want to apply under this program, you have to submit an application to CLC, that's Canadian Labour Congress, and they do the primary screening. They determine whether you're eligible or not, and they assess your application. And then once they satisfy that your application is complete and you meet their eligibility requirements, they send it over to RCC, who then takes on and processes the application. So you don't apply directly to the RCC, but you apply through CLC first, and then they take on. We're not sure if they will extend this program to other provinces right now, but based on the housing crisis that we currently face in Canada, it's possible. Do you agree, Alicia?
Yeah, I mean, and this is the problem. RCM is, the immigration department is kind of floating these bubbles, and they are, I guess, recognizing a need based on their consultations and based on the work that they've done to try to get some feedback from Canadians, from institutions, from various sectors within the economy, but they haven't provided specific or tangible details. And so it's all speculation until there's actually a policy that's announced with program details associated with it. So we don't have anything tangible yet, and we will have to see what develops.
Yeah.
The other thing that I did want to add to, Igor, is even for the GTA program, my worry is that they are going to fill up those 1,000 spots already if they haven't already done so. So even though that program is technically open until January, I suspect that those spots may already be filled, and if they're not already filled, there's probably only a couple spots left. So yeah, that is something where it would be nice if they have these temporary public policies for them also to give a live update of how many applications have already been accepted and completed, so that people have an idea of how many spots are left.
Yeah. We have another question about the rounds of invitation, and what I wanted to share here is the screen right here. So we can take a look and calculate approximately how many applications they accept in a month and why there was not a draw happening. So in October, 3,600, 3,700, so that's like over 7,000 already. Then about 9,000, like about 10,000 applications that they accepted in October. And that's pretty much similar to what they accepted in September. And then very similar to what they accepted in October. So my understanding is once they reach 10,000, they take a little pause until they're able to take on new applications, new candidates. So Alicia, do you envision the next draw happening like next week so that they have enough applications to work on?
I would hope that it's this week, right? I would hope that they actually do a draw this week. And it used to be fairly regular that we could predict what day of the week that they would normally do the draw. It's usually every 2 weeks. It's kind of bouncing around all over the place now, and sometimes they do a few back-to-back draws, but often they do a draw on a Wednesday or a Thursday. So we'll see. Sometimes we've been on the live, and then as soon as we get off the live, we notice that they've done a draw. So fingers crossed that they will do a draw this week.
Yeah, and I'm subscribed to a bot that sends me an automated message as soon as there is a draw. So if there is a draw that happens right on the live stream, I'll let you know as soon as possible, and we can take a look at the draw. All right, we have another question from David, and David is asking, what's the future of Express Entry? And so they have 2 years of Canadian work experience in Vancouver in NOC 2. And then David is wondering whether he can apply for the permanent residence through the Atlantic Provinces program.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
typically, yeah, you would need a local work experience, but with Atlantic Provinces program, um, there's a way, there's a pathway, as long as you get the job offer from the employer in the Atlantic Provinces.
mm-hmm. And David, it's, this is something that we talk with on a consultation all the time. So we will sit down and talk with you and try to understand, okay, what is your background? How many CRS points do you have? Where was your education? Do you have family members that are in Canada? Because it's always tricky to try to prove that intent to reside in a particular province. And so, if you're looking at Express Entry, then yes, Express Entry is not going away. It is still here. It will continue to be here under the new immigration levels plan. Those number of economic immigrants is going up proportionally, right? So we are increasing the number of economic immigrants that we are bringing to Canada, and that will continue for the next foreseeable future for the next 5 years. And then they're saying that it'll maybe level out around 500,000 after a few years from now. So the tricky thing is trying to figure out based on your CRS and your connections to which province, what are your pathways? And normally I generally recommend that if you have multiple options, then you can, put in that Express Entry application, maybe put in that BC PNP application. But if you can't qualify for a BC PNP and you're thinking about moving your life to one of the Atlantic provinces, sometimes the time to do that is sooner rather than later if you really want to get your foot in the door and have those connections with the local employers, and that's going to maximize your chances to try to get in through the Atlantic provinces or the AIP programs. And those are good programs. They are really trying to attract people to the Atlantic provinces, but you really need to be genuine and actually intend to continue to live in those Atlantic provinces, because for you to move out there simply to turn around and come back to BC would not be genuine, and it could put your PR at risk. So you are going to look at moving out for Atlantic immigration, then make sure that you're finding the place you ultimately want to settle.
Alicia, we have another super chat. Lots of super chats today. This time is from VK. So VK has an approved LMIA for 3 years for NOx 0, and he got his work permit approved. But how shall I know that my work permit will be closed and it will be for 3 years? Um,
Okay, so yeah, so what normally happens, VK, is the company will apply for the LMIA, the National Occupation Classification Code. So if it's a NOC 0, then you're usually upper management. And if the LMIA is approved for a 3-year duration, then when you are doing the work permit application or your company's helping you do the work permit application, you need to make an argument for why that 3-year term is required. And so normally the employer needs to give you that job offer, they need to describe the position and why the 3-year duration is required for the work permit to be issued for the full 3 years. If you're from a visa required country, then of course you need to send in your passport to get the visa, which is good. But the work permit issuance actually happens if you get that letter from immigration saying, yes, we have in principle approved your work permit application, and then you travel on that visa, you apply for the actual work permit. Well, you've submitted the application ahead of time, but they issue it to you. The officer is going to actually hand it to you if you are approved at the port of entry. So at the airport where you'll be flying in. And this is where the officer can ask you questions about, what kind of job you're doing, what kind of company, what kind of position. Normally, it's pretty straightforward. They will look at what's been filed on their system to be able to issue that work permit. But a few things can shorten the duration of your work permit. One of them, the most important one, is if your passport is going to expire. So if your passport is not valid for the full 3 years, you will not get a full 3 years on the work permit. They are only going to give you that work permit validity to the expiry of your passport. So be careful with that. But in general, as long as there's no other, the immigration officer is not worried about the bona fides or whether you have an application that is real and whether you have qualifications to be able to satisfy those job requirements. As long as everything is legit and it checks out, then they should issue you the full term.
yeah. Okay. Next question is from Daniela. She's asking whether we envision any French language category-based draws until the end of the year. And I would say yes, why not? They have their target, and if I'm not mistaken, Alicia, was it 10 or 15% for French speakers?
So for Francophone, it was 11 to 15 was the target. And so there is a little bit of wiggle room there. They've got 11 to 15% of overall applications under Express Entry they want to have as Francophone speakers. And so, it'll be interesting to see what the numbers end up being by the end of this calendar year. But it's difficult to say because even though they do Francophone targeted draws, there are a number of Francophone speakers who are coming in under the no program specified. So, as a member of the general public, we don't have insight in terms of how many Francophone speakers have already been admitted into Express Entry this year. But all we can say is, they have a target of 11 to 15% for Express Entry for this year. And hopefully we will have another Francophone draw, but they tend to be smaller in terms of numbers of applicants invited on each targeted draw.
Yeah, so in the last draw, they invited only 486 candidates, but then before, they invited 472, and then let's see, 435. So yeah, not too many applicants. Oh, actually, I'm so sorry. I was looking at the wrong column. So 300 applicants in the last draw, 500 applicants in another draw, and then 800 applicants compared to 3,000, 4,000 applicants drawn under no program specified draws. And again, as we've talked, mostly you can qualify for no program specified draws if you're superhuman or you both know both languages.
Right.
All right, so the next one is from Evans. Evans is saying that he has 6 months of experience as a pharmacist assistant in Canada and 5 years of foreign work experience, and so he qualifies for the category-based draw. Now, would he need settlement funds? And that really depends on whether you qualify for the Canadian experience class if you have other skilled work experience in Canada, continuous 1 year, or if you qualify for the federal skilled worker program and if you're outside or inside Canada, and whether you work on a valid job offer and you have a work permit in Canada. So let me just share the screen and we can show you exactly where to look for this information. So who doesn't need a proof of funds? And they give two categories of people. First is if you're applying for the CEC, and then the other one is if you authorize to work in Canada and you have a valid job offer. Alicia, anything else to add here?
Yeah, keep in mind that when they say valid job offer, they mean arranged employment points. So if you do not yet have the 1 year to qualify for CEC, then the only way that you don't have to prove settlement funds is if you have those 50 points for arranged employment, meaning that you have a closed work permit. So your employer is listed on your work permit, probably with an LMIA in this case, or if there's some other pharmacy assistants are normally not hired under one of the international categories. So it's probably going to be a situation where you'd have to have your employer would have an LMIA, and then they have agreed that they would continue to employ you for another year after you get PR. And if you can prove all that and you did get those 50 points for arranged employment, then you would be able to, if you get an ITA, in your EAPR field, it'll ask you for proof of settlement funds, and you'll have to provide a letter of explanation, provide a clip from the website that shows that you don't need to prove settlement funds if you have already been authorized to work in Canada and you have the valid job offer, and then go through why you meet those proper arranged employment points.
Yeah. And Evans, when you get an ITA, there will be a table in this letter that you will receive in your profile, and it will tell you for exactly what program you qualify. So it will list federal skilled trades, federal skilled worker, CEC, and then it would say met or not met the requirements of this program. And if it says met for CEC, then you're good to go. Otherwise, keep in mind what we've just discussed.
Yeah, and unless you didn't enter your work experience properly, and then it can
Yeah,
be an issue. But yeah.
exactly. All right, Mary is asking, would we recommend using GCKey or IRCC portal when we file a visitor visa application? Ooh.
That's a good question, Marie. They ask for information differently. And it also depends on your country of nationality, I find. So it depends, Marie. If people are applying, normally if they are Indian citizens and there are a whole bunch of issues getting processed through India right now, that's always going to be a challenge, no matter which way you try to file. It is interesting to see, Igor, I think you and I have noticed when we get back those access to information requests, it's pretty comprehensive. When people have filed through the new portal, through the new TR portal, there's a lot of information, but it's all coded directly from the drop-down fields. So there's almost no officer comments whatsoever. It's all just kind of a verbatim printout of what people had put in their applications in the first place. So you see more information in those online TR portal applications than you do in the GCKey. So it depends on which country you're applying from, what your temporary intent is, how long you want to stay in Canada, what your ties are to your home country.
And Alicia, one other concern that we consider is the extent to which they use Chinook system to process those applications. And we have rumors that if you apply through the old good way through GCKey with those forms, it wouldn't trigger Chinook as much. Is this correct, or is just a hearsay?
Well, it, it might be just a rumor, but practically they have access to more data because you have to hard code in every single field. Whereas in GCKey, it gives you those upload spots for, client information or supporting information, and people can bundle different documents when they actually go to put the PDFs in, and it's not all necessarily hard coded in. And the forms, you're uploading a PDF form, which is a validated barcode form often, which extracts the information, but there's less that's hard coded into the system. So I would agree with you, Igor, that there's probably less ability to use AI so far under the old GCKey, and there's more ability to triage with the new TR portal, and that's why those applications are trying to be urged. IRCC likes it when people file through the new portal because it's easier for them to make decisions faster.
Yeah. And another concern is that when you apply through GCKey, your upload spot is 4 megabyte. When you apply through the RCC portal, it's just 2 megabytes. So that really depends on how many documents you have. So sometimes you want to attach all your bank statements and your savings certificates and your work letters and your pay stubs, and it can take large large file to upload. So sometimes you would need to reconsider, maybe apply through the GCKey. Okay, we have another comment, and this one comes from either Prem or Mark. I'm not sure exactly who's watching, but it's a good reminder that we do have an Express Entry Masterclass starting this Monday. So you still have another 4 days to join. And when you join the masterclass, when you subscribe to the Express Entry course, and let me just pull it up, I will show you where to find it. So let's see. Yeah, this is the website. So you type CanadianImmigrationInstitute.com and you go to our website, and then right here you will have the Express Entry course. And when you subscribe to the course, it costs $347, but for this amount you get hours and hours of video content. So 642 minutes of video tutorials that walk you step by step through all aspects of Express Entry. So by the time you finish the course, you will be I would not say an expert in Express Entry, but you would know about Express Entry more than your consultant or other representative might do. You will know exactly what to fill, where to fill it, and if the course does not answer your question or you still have some gaps in your understanding of how to apply, you can join the masterclass, and that's what starts on Monday. So Mark will go live 1 hour for 1 hour from Monday to Thursday, and you can ask whatever questions you have. And that's just the perfect way to understand how to answer your answers to the questions, what documents to use, how to verify if your work reference letter is good enough or not good enough. So really consider this as an opportunity to learn all you need to know about the Express Entry Masterclass, Express Entry process. And one other thing, once you subscribe to the course, you get access to all future masterclasses. So it's not just one, you can reattend every time that we do another masterclass session. Okay? Let's see.
And
Yeah.
Igor, I know we're running out of time, but I did want to see there's a question from Shazad Mahmood, and it says, hi, can I directly land in Quebec with COPR, or do I have to get a PR card from another province and then move to Quebec to settle? And I wanted to address this one because this is alarm bells ringing in my head. If you did an Express Entry application and you got a confirmation of permanent residence under Express Entry, there is no way in the world that you should be landing in Quebec because you are not eligible to be accepted under Express Entry if you have an intent to reside in Quebec. So be very, very, very careful. And I would urge you to reach out to a immigration practitioner in Quebec if you do want to immigrate to Quebec. If you are looking at doing express entry, keep in mind that you have to live in any province other than Quebec. If you go and land in Quebec, they will basically say that you are misrepresenting, and that is not going to go well.
Yeah. Alicia, we do have another super chat from the same person, VK. And so he says, what documents does he need to present at the port of entry for the issuance of the work permit? And can he work without a social insurance number while he waits for it? Or he can apply for social insurance at the airport?
So, VK, some of these questions are really specific, and I'd urge you to reach out and book a consultation. In general, when you're applying for a work permit, if it's an LMIA-based work permit, the companies and the company's lawyers usually are going to have a bunch of input into what is included in that application. We have a very specific way of applying for work permit packages for people who do have an LMIA and making sure that everything is lined up, that everything from the employer is there, the offer is there. you've got a description about your resume, your background, how you meet the requirements of the job, your education, your prior experience. Um, there's all sorts of things in terms of documentation, depending on whether you're bringing a spouse and children. So those are all things to consider. Social insurance numbers, this is what you need to have in order to be able to start getting your payroll deductions and everything through the government. And that is issued through ESDC or Service Canada. So go take a look at the Service Canada website to see how you apply for that social insurance number. Normally, companies will have a transition period where, you know, they still need to pay you even if you don't have that social insurance number issued yet if you are working. But talk to your company's HR because they should know how their internal processes are going to work for that. You cannot apply for a social insurance number at the airport unless you're doing it mobilely on your phone through the Service Canada app or ability. So,
Yeah, and actually, speaking about the online application for social insurance number, the wait time can be much longer than if you appear in person. I remember when my family relatives came over to Canada, I think the wait time was like 2 months or something. It was
oh
crazy
wow.
because all of the people suddenly rushed to get their passports renewed after COVID-19. And the best way was to come over like very early in the morning, take your place in the line, and just wait until you see the officer. And then you would have this piece of paper by the time you leave the Service Canada location. But social insurance is definitely one of the first documents that I would recommend you absolutely get, because you would need social insurance to open your bank account. You would need a bank account to get your Canadian phone number, and then you would need a phone number to subscribe to all other services. So it's like the very, very first step that you need to take. So I remember our strategy was as soon as our family members landed, next day, immediately, early morning, we go to Service Canada location. We have another comment from Mark, and I think this would be a good segue to wrapping this live Q&A up. Mark is giving us thanks, and he's currently in the air, flying. Like, what a wonderful time we live in, right? You can be like 10 kilometers up in the air and still watch live Q&A, which is amazing. So good luck to Mark at the conference in Quebec, and we'll see you on. Do we do live Q&A tomorrow, Alicia?
No, it's only on Wednesdays. So
Okay.
next week, same time, same place at 10 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, and we look forward to connecting with more of you.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a really good Q&A. Wonderful questions and wonderful super chat questions. If you feel like you need more help, um, you have a very specific situation that you would want to discuss, we encourage you to go to our website, holthelaw.com. Let me just pull it up. And then you click speak to a lawyer, and then you choose whether you want to have a 25-minute consult or a 50-minute consult. That really depends on the complexity of your situation, but most of the questions can be answered within the 25-minute consult time. And then you can choose the lawyer who you want to talk to, because we all have different availability, and we can accommodate you at the time that works best for you. All right. So that's pretty much it. Thank you so much, Alicia. We'll see everyone next week. Bye
All
bye.
right. Thank you so much, Igor.
Bye.